the politics of fear. That was a term, I don't know who first coined it, but there was quite a well-known paper in economics in the early 2000s by a guy called Gerard Padre Miguel, who's at Yale now. He's an economist, political scientist. Okay, so the politics of fear is a situation like this. So you have a village. First thing is people are organized by identity, right? So it could be caste, it could be tribe. If it's in his context was more tribe because it was an African village as he was looking at this. And the first thing you want is your support will always go to somebody from your identity group. Okay, that's the first thing. So for the most part, everyone's going to say, look, I'm going to support our guy. And we coordinate about who our guy is, right? Now, what he noticed was that in a lot of contexts like this, where everyone organizes their support, whether it's voting or some other way of getting a person in power, where everyone organizes it based on identity, you often get what he calls the politics of fear, which is leaders who are corrupt, inefficient, nepotistic, venal. They keep getting supported and re-elected and re-supported by their groups. So he asks, why would that ever happen? We want to have somebody from our group be the leader, but why would we pick a terrible person? That somebody who everyone agrees is terrible and corrupt? And the answer he gives is the following. He says, look, suppose you have an incumbent leader who's just like that. We all know this guy's a bum. He's awful. What are we worried about? Well, he does a bad job. We know, there'd be almost anyone in our group would be a better leader. But we're worried that if we throw him out, if we try to move against him, that's going to increase the chances that our group is going to lose control. That was going to make another group more likely to be able to seize the leadership. Now, why? Because, the fact that our leader, he might be awful and everything, but he's been there for a long time. He's got connections. He knows how things run. He's experienced. So we're worried so much about the other group coming to power that this entrenches our support for a really bad leader, somebody we all agree is bad. We're too scared to throw him out, so we're scared. That's the fear. We fear another group coming into power. So what that leader can do, he can leverage that fear to govern in ways that are terrible. He can be corrupt because he knows we can't move against him. Also, he knows that if another group were to come into power, they would have the similar problem. They would end up having a leader who's venal and corrupt because they would fear losing power to us. So they would end up having a leader who's also going to be awful. So we're now facing a choice not between replacing our leader with somebody who's better from our group. We're facing a choice between replacing our leader with someone who's potentially better, but who will increase the chances of us losing power to another group. And that other group is also going to have a leader who's corrupt, who can leverage his control over them. So this leads to a kind of a cascading effect. All groups will support leaders, they're incumbent, no matter how corrupt they are. Well, there's a limit on how corrupt they can be, but they will keep supporting them because they fear losing power to the other group. So you can see this really depends on the groups being kind of coalescing around their identities, right? In their support. If you could vote for just the best person, this all falls apart. It's because we really fear the other group getting to power. And when a group gets to power, they'll do things in their interest. So this is where the kind of identity bit, if it's salient for the organization of politics, then the politics of fear can take hold. And then you can have these extremely poor leaders that everyone agrees are poor, but who continue to support nonetheless. Okay, so that's the context. Now just think about what happens if you do a political reservation there. So you have, a bunch of groups, let's say 5 groups, right? They've got a current leader, and this leader's in control. His group keeps supporting him, and that's enough to keep him in control, with a high probability. They know if they remove him, then anything could happen. We might get a better guy, but, the other groups might take over. So now we put in a political quota to that village, and we say, look, and let's just suppose it, just for thought experiment, suppose it happens to the exact same group that's now in power, right? So they've got their corrupt leader in power. and you say to them, look, you know what? Next election, don't worry about it. You guys have won. You've got it. You've got it for another term. That's what the quota does, right? It says it has to be from this identity group. Now they can go, look, now we've won it. We're certain to win, so we don't need to keep supporting this guy. Now we can freely remove this really terrible politician and replace him with someone else who's better. We don't have to fear. The politics of fear gets really alleviated by the quota.
Okay. So
that can get an improvement in governance. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So at least in concept, then the idea is that by implementing quotas like this, these instances in India, what you're essentially doing is removing an element of the politics of fear, by basically taking the decision to some degree away from the individuals to say, like, right, this is your subset of options. And what that allows you to them to basically do is like, oh, actually, yeah. So now that that's been done, we can actually just pick the best option available, and that works better in a case than if you just had, sort of free and open sort of elections on some of these things. And I guess the argument would be that you actually get a more, I'm trying to think of the right word, but you get essentially a more idealistic version, I guess, because of democracy in many ways. I think most of us would hope that, you have candidates, people put their cases forward, people will then vote for the best candidate then gets in. That's a very idealistic, maybe naive view of like with how democracies work to maybe some of these countries. And perhaps implementing some of these quotas allows a little bit more from that sort of idyllic system amongst the smaller subset. I guess maybe that's the kind of argument being presented.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. I think it's let me put it slightly differently, just to put it back to you, but I think that's exactly it. So ideally, it's a contest. That's what a political contest is in a democracy. It's a contest between all of the candidates and you pick the best one. Now, when we instead become kind of tribal in our mindset and we coalesce around our identities in selecting our candidate, then we want the person, and again, we want the best person from our group to be our candidate, right? That would be the best thing. But now there's a trade-off, right? You might have the person who's the best, say the most decent person as the representative, but this person might be much more likely to lose against the other group. So you might now want to choose somebody who's not a decent person, but who's an experienced politician who's going to make sure you get the win for your group. So now there's a trade-off. When your identity is determining who you vote for, not just the best person, then you're scared of losing power to the other group. So now you might pick somebody who's not really a good person and not going to be a good leader, but at least they'll be your guy. And what the reservations do is they say, all that's off the table. You guys, one of you groups have won it for sure. Now you can just pick the best person. So it frees you from that concern about losing power to the other groups. You lost it. It's gone to another group. Now that other group gets to decide, essentially, and they're going to pick the best person. So that's going to lead to a bump up in quality.
So in a way then, because you could almost like make the argument this is like incorporating such a system is implementing a system of identity politics and sort of manifesting it. But I guess the irony is the pro for it is that you're actually removing identity politics from the system and just allowing people to actually vote in the absence of identity politics in many ways, which is quite interesting.
It's kind of ironic.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it like that.
But in another way, it is, firstly, it's privileging identity politics right up front. It's saying, no, this is the primary factor. This is going to determine who the leader is. So all of the other identity politics competition is gone. That group has won it. And it's a randomization process that determines who wins it. But then after that, within that group, now you get to compete. And therefore, over that dimension of quality, the identity politics stops being relevant. So that's why it can work to improve quality. So if the identity politics is key to determining the nature of the representative, this is a system to destroy that. Now, if it isn't key to determining it, then it has the other problems. But if it is key to determining it, if that's how the political system works, this sort of system could break it.